Hey, so there's been a few discussions recently that made me think we'd have a little quick chat about this stuff, sheet music notation. So basically, it's sort of centered around, do we need it when we're learning drums? We don't really care about other instruments, do we? So, do we need it to learn this instrument? I mean, the short answer is not necessarily. I mean, you could learn purely by just jamming to any music. Just put some tracks on and away you go. But, it's quite limiting, really. And at the end of the day, we are trying to learn drums properly. We're learning all the ins and outs. We're learning technique. We're learning different styles of music. We're learning all the ins and outs, and what we want to be standout drummers. We don't want to be all surrounds, just run of the mill. So, but you see, the thing is, fundamentally, when you're learning drums, the way we tend to do it is to learn a bunch of drills. So, for example, here's a bunch of rhythms, or here's a bunch of fills. So say you were to take away a sheet with 10 fills on, and you're pretty much a beginner, and you walk out that door, how much of that do you think you're going to remember? Not much, I think, is the answer. Maybe 10%. So people get bogged down a little bit in this idea of sheet music and all the lines and squiggles. And, as I say, the main thing is just think of it as a reminder, a way of getting you on the right foot and going, oh, what was that fill I did? Oh, yeah, that's what I should be doing. It's true to say, how much do you actually use full notation in your average rock band on the local scene? And quite possibly not at all. But the thing is, it's not the point, really. It's just a learning tool. And the other thing that's useful to know is, because it's just like, oh, it's so complicated, I don't want to learn all those hieroglyphics. Well, you don't need to learn it all. You need to know what you need for this moment in time, which is probably not very much, to be honest. And it's really quite logical. It's nothing to fear at all. And the way I was taught was basically the music just sits there in the background, and you don't stress about it. It's just there as a helping hand, really. It's a little bit different to other instruments, likes of guitar, because again, your typical rock musician is not going to be using full notation, because you can work through your chords, you can scales, without sheet music, really, and then you can use tab to learn your songs. So you don't really need it to that degree necessarily, not unless you're going to be a pro, maybe, because session guy. Same with the drums, really. If you were to do say film scores or something like that, work in orchestra, you do need to be able to read, but then you're at that, if you're going to that kind of level, it's just going to be part and parcel of what you do. You're going to be doing it day in, day out, so you're going to get used to it. But anyway, so the other thing is, I find that sometimes if I'm learning a song, what you can find is you've got 85% of it, and then something you can't quite get a grip on. You could take the attitude, well, I don't care, I'll just sling any old thing in there. But again, we don't really like that attitude. We're not about that here. We want to get it right. That doesn't necessarily mean being copying things note for note, and trying to be an exact copy of the original drummer. That's not what we're saying. It's just being faithful to the part you're playing, and rather than that will do. kind of approach, which is just, you know, you don't need drum lessons if that's the approach you're taking. But you're also arguably going to be, you know, pretty average, you know, and why do we want to go out there and be just average? Why do we want to be just the same as everyone else? You know, it's not about being egotistical. It's just trying to be the best you personally can. So anyway, but anyway, so like I say, there's nothing really to fear from reading music. It's quite straightforward, really. They come up with some great little things there. I don't know if you can see on this piece of paper, you probably just about can, that you know, we differentiate between different parts of the kit. So the cymbals, it's easy to see what's a cymbal and what's a drum. So you can separate them out quite easily. You can also separate out your feet and hands quite easily because the feet live at the bottom of the music. You know, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So if you see an X at the bottom of the music, it's a symbol that you operate with your foot. Hi-hat. So yeah, it's, you know, it's quite a lot of logic, and the way, you know, the higher the tom you play, the higher pitch, the higher up on the music you're going to be. So, you know, that's quite a logical thing, really. It's possible when you first start reading, you see this a lot with, you know, you're trying to interpret your first songs, and you might mix up a snare and a floor tom, say. So, you know, we tend to make certain assumptions when we're starting, you know, like if you've hit your first tom, we tend to assume that it's going to be second tom next. So obviously we try and teach that out of you as much as we possibly can. But like I say, we're not necessarily all about reading. As I say, coming back to the main point again, it is just a tool to help us through and help you remember what you're doing, because hopefully we're practicing, right? You know, if we want to get anywhere. So that's about it, really. But like I say, it's, you know, it's something I've met quite a few times over the years teaching people, that there's a reluctance or fear of the music, or oh, I don't need to do that, it's just rock music, so I'll just wing it. And, you know, but again, I think it's going to be very difficult to progress at any kind of speed, you know, because you can't possibly work on drills, because you're just not going to remember them. But once you've got a basic set of tools, you know, difference between quarter notes and eighth notes, you can pull things together pretty quickly. And it's just, you know, I certainly found that invaluable, you know. But I think some of it comes back to the idea of wanting to take shortcuts, you know. If I don't read, you know, that's going to be difficult and take lots of time. So, you know, but it does take time to learn an instrument, you know, and if you want to learn it well and you want to be a reasonable musician, you have to put the work in. It's simple as that. But it shouldn't be a chore to do that. You know, if you're doing what you like doing, playing this instrument, you know, find the time. Try not to make excuses, you know. Life does get in the way sometimes, but just, you know, you got to do it and find us. This is also why it just reminded me, actually, why pad work is a very good thing to do, because you can do that anywhere, anytime. Sling a pad in your briefcase, in your suitcase, whatever, and you can work on your hand technique wherever you are, and you're not really going to disturb anyone especially if you go in another room and just tip tapping away. So anyway, don't fear it. Give it a go, is what I would say. See you later.